bet you don't have estate planning.
I'm fucking 28 years old. Why would I need that?
I'm about to show you.
So it's official, the Beekeeper 2 is happening, and Jason Statham is all set to come back for more. This time, though, there'll be a bit of a shakeup behind the camera, with a brand new director stepping in. The first Beekeeper movie, which hit theaters early in 2024, introduced audiences to Statham's character Adam Clay, a retired beekeeper operative who decides to go on a ruthless mission of revenge after someone close to him gets scammed. That movie, which also starred Emmy Raver-Lampman, Jeremy Irons, and Josh Hutcherson, was generally well received. In fact, it turned out to be a surprise hit at the box office, which naturally sparked plenty of buzz about the possibility of a sequel. Now, thanks to a new report from Deadline, we know that Miramax and Statham are officially reuniting for the Beekeeper 2. Interestingly, David Ayer, who directed the first movie, won't be back in the director's chair. Instead, they brought on Timo Tjahjanto, known for his blood-pumping action work in movies like The Night Comes For Us, to lead the sequel. Kurt Wimmer, who wrote the original screenplay, is also returning to write this one, which should help keep it tied closely to the first film's style and story. Meanwhile, there's talk of Ayer sticking around as a producer, keeping him involved in some capacity. Filming's expected to start this fall, and Amazon MGM Studios, which helped with domestic distribution for the first movie, is apparently a top pick to handle it again. The fact that Tjahjanto is taking over the director's seat says a lot about the direction they might be going with the sequel. Sure, Ayer was a huge reason why the first movie got those positive reviews and did so well at the box office, but Tjahjanto's no rookie when it comes to crafting thrilling action. His resume's packed with intense Indonesian Netflix action flicks like The Night Comes For Us, The Big Four, and his most recent, The Shadow Strays, which came out in 2024 and did pretty well. On top of that, he's already on Hollywood's radar with Nobody 2 starring Bob Odenkirk, so the Beekeeper 2 seems like a natural next step for him to show off what he can do. Even though fans might be a little bummed that the Beekeeper 2 won't be another team-up between Statham and Ayer, those two clearly still have a strong working bond. Statham is actually starring in Ayer's next project, an action thriller called A Working Man, which hits theaters in March 2025. That means even if Ayer isn't directing this sequel, his creative fingerprints might still show up behind the scenes, especially if he officially signs on as a producer. So, what does all this mean for the Beekeeper 2 itself? Well, having Tjahjanto at the helm could actually be a great thing. His style of directing, super kinetic and brutal, could mesh really well with Statham's physical, no-nonsense approach to action. It might even lead to the sequel topping the original when it comes to sheer intensity and spectacle. And since Wimmer is writing the script again, there's a good chance the sequel will still have the same dark humor and pulpy self-awareness that made the first one stand out. The original Beekeeper pulled in an impressive $152 million globally on what was roughly a $40 million budget. So, it's no surprise the studio wanted to jump back into this world. After all, Statham pumps out action movies on a pretty steady basis, and not all of them hit the mark. But the Beekeeper felt like it knew exactly what it was. Over the top, slightly absurd, but totally entertaining. It leaned into how wild the whole premise was, mixing brutal fight scenes with a bit of tongue-in-cheek humor, and audiences clearly appreciated that. If the sequel can keep that same vibe, it should be in good shape. Tjahjanto might actually be the perfect guy to take over. His previous films show he's got a knack for choreographing inventive, hard-hitting action scenes, which pairs nicely with Statham's style. There are still a bunch of open questions, though, like which supporting cast members might come back or whether the sequel will dig deeper into the secretive beekeeper organization that Adam Clay once worked for. But with everything lining up the way it is, the project already looks pretty promising. Looking at the story side of things, there's still so much about Adam Clay's past that hasn't been explored. In the first movie, we see him as this unstoppable force, someone who's basically retired, but can still outmaneuver and outfight just about anyone. He takes down teams of mercenaries, sneaks into heavily guarded estates, and wins brutal one-on-ones without breaking much of a sweat. Because of all that, it feels kind of odd that retirement would be a natural next step for a guy like him. There's clearly more story to tell. So if the Beekeeper 2 decides to dive into why exactly Clay left the Beekeepers, that could open up all sorts of interesting possibilities. Maybe there's an age rule baked into the organization's code, or maybe something happened that made him walk away. The first film deliberately keeps the Beekeeper group shrouded in mystery. What exactly do they do? Who runs them? And why do they exist? That leaves plenty of juicy narrative threads a sequel could pull on. Plus, it could give audiences more insight into how Clay really feels about the group and whether he has any lingering issues or unfinished business with them. There's also the broader franchise potential to think about. The first Beekeeper laid down some intriguing groundwork that could easily support a whole series of movies. Imagine if future films expand on the rules of the Beekeepers, introduce rival organizations, or reveal new operatives with their own agendas. Maybe Clay isn't the only ex-Beekeeper struggling with ghosts from his past, or perhaps new recruits pop up, eager to learn from the legend himself. It could even become a sort of globe-trotting saga following different Beekeepers around the world. And since Giganto's known for pushing action sequences to the limit, there's a good chance the sequel might feature even crazier set pieces. That could be exactly what Statham needs right now. Over the years, some of his sequels haven't quite lived up to expectations, at least in terms of box office returns. But with the Beekeeper 2, there's a real opportunity to break that pattern and deliver something that outdoes the original. It'll also be interesting to see how the humor plays out in the sequel. Part of what made the first movie work was how it seemed to wink at the audience, fully aware of how exaggerated everything was. That balance of gritty violence and sly humor is tricky, but if they pull it off again, it could cement the Beekeeper series as one of Statham's most memorable runs. So even though there are still a lot of unknowns, like the official plot, new characters, and whether familiar faces will return, it's hard not to be optimistic. Between Giganto's flair for kinetic action, Wimmer's steady hand on the script, and Statham diving back into the role of Adam Clay, there's every reason to think the Beekeeper 2 could not only live up to the first movie, but maybe even surpass it. And who knows? If it does well enough, we might be looking at the Beekeeper 3 a few years down the line, diving even deeper into Clay's shadowy world. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.